Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today on our Flatfile webinar focused on the field services industry, specifically how to streamline data imports for faster customer onboarding. To quickly introduce the Flatfile team, my name is Kyle Costa. I am a field services lead here at Flatfile. Joining me on the call today is Sinyeon Shin. She is a customer engineer, again, focused on the field services space here at Flatfile. So before I jump into the agenda, just want to talk a little bit about Flatfile, give you a little background. We've been in business since 2018. Over the last 6 years or so, we've grown the company to over 70 full-time employees. We've taken or raised about 100 million in funding through our Series B, led by some of the top VCs, as you see down below, such as Tiger Global, Workday Ventures, Gradient, and more. And we've been able to sort of bring on over 500 customers in that time. Now, the problem that we are solving for is that migrating data files is complex and costly. And I think some of the reason that we've had so much success here over the last 5 or 6 years is that we really help drive about a 50% or more reduction in the time it takes to onboard new customers and bring on that data. Now, specific to the field services space, we're working with some of the sort of top companies such as ServiceTitan, Jobber, Housecall Pro, BuildOps, and more. In fact, we have a quote here from the Director of Implementation from BuildOps that says that Flatfile is one of the more important tools in their implementation toolbox. And without tools like Flatfile, scaling would be almost impossible. Just to set the stage for today and run through a quick agenda, I'm going to be covering some slides to start out. First, we're going to be focusing on, what is data migration? What is the problem, the challenge that we're actually solving for? What are some of the common pitfalls with data migration? What are some of the considerations for designing data migration solutions? What are some of the business impacts of data migration? And then we're going to shift gears, and I'm going to be passing this over to Sinyeon. She's going to be running you through sort of a live demo of the Flatfile platform, specific to how field services teams use Flatfile today. And then lastly, we're going to sort of wrap up with some Q&A, but don't think that you need to wait till the end to put in some questions. There should be a little Q&A tab within your Zoom screen. Feel free to send those in at any time throughout the presentation. We'll make sure to get those answered for you by the end of the call. Cool. So, what is data migration? What are we talking about? This is sometimes referred to as, data onboarding or simply file import or data or file exchange. But what we're talking about is it's really about the need to import highly variant, semi-structured data from your customers and getting it into an ingestible format, for your systems or your software. Traditional ETL and data management tools that have been around for a long time, they work well when you have a limited number of systems that need to exchange back and forth. And most importantly, when you have control and ownership over both of those systems. But as your customers grow and the number of systems that they use in their own business grows, so does the variable nature of the data that they want to share with you. So kind of net, what we're doing is we're helping provide a streamlined approach to migrating sort of that unknown source data to a known fixed destination. To expand on that a little bit further, we help turn files into API-ready data with what we call human-in-the-loop automation. And the value of this, for your organization is going to be that you're going to be able to get your data files into your system faster. You're going to be able to reduce the number of data errors. You're going to be able to drastically reduce the cost of manual data cleanup and/or the software development that you're throwing at this today. And then finally, we're going to allow for you to import clean, normalized, and validated data. So let's talk a little bit about, historically, how people handle this. Some of you on the call today, this might be how you're approaching your data migration process as well. And we see this commonly sort of pre-Flatfile. So there's 3 main ways that people do handle this. The first would be a services-based approach where you're essentially throwing manual resources at the problem. Good old sweat equity, doing all this manually and putting a lot of hours into that process. The second would be sort of a templates-based approach where you're providing your end users or customers with templates and rules for importing their data. Essentially, you're sort of making this the end user's problem, and oftentimes it comes with a very large PDF that can be cumbersome for the users. The last one would be a custom build of an importer, or what we see more commonly is many importers. It's not uncommon for us to talk to a prospect that's got 10, 20, 30, I've even seen up to 50 different importers within a single organization. None of these options are great options. They're expensive. They often lead to a poor customer experience that takes way too long. So let's talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls of some of these three different methods that I was just talking about, or where things fall short with them. The first is probably most important, is that it can be very confusing for end users, and often requires technical expertise to sort of complete this data migration process. This can be a very, very daunting sort of first mile of the product experience for someone who's excited that just purchased, your software or service, and they want to be able to start using it, but they're not necessarily a data engineer or technical expert. So it can really cause some friction in the first mile of the experience for them. And often it has to be supplemented with, your implementation teams, your support teams, sometimes your development teams, to be able to help them get their data migrated. The second would be, asynchronous iterative feedback cycles. So these can create a lot of lag in the overall experience, and it results in lost momentum in the overall project. The third one that we see commonly is, that you're going to provide them with rigid requirements and ask the customer to kind of conform to those. We often see our prospects that they're doing their best to try and make it as easy and approachable as possible. But at the end of the day, they're giving their customer homework, and it's not generally the most straightforward task. So we've found that sort of meeting the customer where they are is a much better approach here. And then the last one would be scalability. So all of these methods provide, not much more than a framework for approaching data migration, and none of them scale very well. So how can we make this better? What are some of the key considerations in building a data migration solution, and how did Flatfile go about sort of building the platform out? I think, one thing that we've done a very good job of at Flatfile, and even as we continue to iterate and sort of build new functionality or features, we always keep that human-centered approach. And what we mean by that is making it very easy for a non-technical user to be able to use those valuable features and functionality that we do provide, and make it easy for them to load, map, clean, and sort of import their data. The second would be inline resolution and collaboration. We sort of help you, avoid those iterative feedback cycles that can slow things down by supporting this inline and allowing your customers to be able to collaborate with your post-sales teams or your support teams or your development teams, sort of inline in our UI. The third one would be flexibility for variability. I think this is also another really important one here. If going back to 2018, the first version of Flatfile was even a lot more rigid than what you see today. And we found that you need to provide a very flexible solution to account for that variability that you're undoubtedly going to encounter between customer to customer. And the last one here would be AI and continuous learning. We've invested heavily in AI. We leverage AI today to help automate as much of the process as we can. Things like, remembering mapping so that we can auto map for the users and sort of eliminate that step for them. Things like being able to do transformations across your data set in bulk using natural language processing and AI to make that transformation. So this is really going to help you save some time and also scale across your customer base. Some of the business impacts, as we have them listed out here, before sort of Flatfile and some of these processes that we were talking about earlier, and sort of after, and the impact that we can have there. So the first would be, improving your CSAT and NPS scores. Being able to surprise and delight them with a best-in-class, first mile of that customer experience can go a long way in creating a happy, long-lasting customer. The second would be accelerated customer go lives, and this is a big one. Creates a ton of ROI for our customers, but being able to de-risk sort of the cutover of systems from their source system to your system, and providing assurance that their go live is going to go smoothly, will go a long way as well. When things get delayed, many times that could lead to customers never going live, or at a bare minimum, a delay in recognizing or collecting revenue from that customer. So we want to help eliminate that. The third would be reducing services costs. This is often viewed as sort of a cost center of services. Between the human-led services and or the custom development that is required to support these processes. With Flatfile being able to streamline this process, we've even seen it turn into what has traditionally been that cost center into a profit center. And then the last one, this is a bit more of an opportunity cost, but going from a barrier to new customer acquisition to be able to turn this into a competitive advantage to acquire more customers. Being a salesperson myself, imagine I'm at the end of my sales cycle and, I'm talking about what the implementation or onboarding is going to be like. And, I'm saying things like it's going to be a 3, 6, 9-month process to get their data migrated from their source system to our system, can cause a lot of hesitation and friction in, the end of that sales cycle. So by being able to turn it into a competitive advantage and saying it's going to go from, months to weeks, can often lead to more sort of close-won revenue for the organization. Cool. I want to talk a little bit about some of the wide range of use cases that we see specific to the field services space. So things like asset data validation and enrichment are pretty common. Multi-sheet data models can be very cumbersome and often need to come in a specific order. They often also have referential data across these different sheets or data models. And this can be very cumbersome for users and how they try to bring in their data. So what we commonly see here specific to field services in terms of referential data on these multi-sheet data models is things like inventory data that references suppliers or work orders that reference customers and technicians. So Sinyan will probably be touching on some of that in the demo here shortly, but we can talk about how we handle that. Another big need is that embedded self-serve experience. We hear this one all the time across field services. We know that your customers are not technical, but what's great is with Flatfile, they don't have to be. We can provide them with that sort of really easy, simple UI that they can go ahead and complete what used to be a cumbersome process in a very streamlined manner. The last one I want to touch on is work orders. They often come in various different formats. And the need for you to be able to sort of validate and standardize to the shape of the data that you need it in to go into your systems is a common use case that we see across the field services space. Cool. I think we're going to shift gears now, and I'm going to hand it over to Sinyan. She is going to be walking you through a live demo of the Flatfile platform in action, again, specific to how field services teams leverage Flatfile today. Sinyan?
Great. Thanks, Kyle. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Alrighty. So this app, fieldservices.show, is designed to be able to showcase what your application could look like in the context of field services and Flatfile. To give some more context on the app, you can see that the fieldservices.show takes in data regarding customers, technicians, and work orders. Here we can see that we already have data in our app for customers and technicians, but there still needs to be data imported to work orders. So let's go ahead and start that process. I'm gonna click this button to import data as one of your end users trying to import data into your app. So when I click on this button, I am thrown straight into Flatfile's platform, which your developers have configured to fit your internal data models. And as the non-technical user, my goal today is just to upload my work order data. But the first thing I see here is the documents page that is configured to be some sort of welcome page. This page is completely customizable and oftentimes is used to actually instruct the users on what to do within Flatfile. So let's take a look at the data we have here. It looks like we already have the technicians' data and the customers' data, which lines up with what we saw in the fieldservices.show app. And I want to still import my work order data. So to do that, I'm going to go over to the file section. And here I can upload the data I want to import to the work order sheet. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop in my file here. So Flatfile can ingest a variety of file types. By default, it is set up to ingest CSV files, but today, as you can see, I am trying to upload an Excel file, and I have the configuration set up in my account to do that. And the thing is, my Excel file has 3 different data sets in them. I have all my data. So I have my customers' data, technicians' data, and the work orders data, but I only want to be able to upload my work orders. So if we go back and we click on the import button, I am actually able to specify which incoming sheets I want to import to which destination I want to import to. So in this case, I want to import the work orders tab from my Excel sheet to the work order sheet in Flatfile. So I'll set that up. I'll click continue. Here is where you can match the incoming file columns to the columns in Flatfile, aka what your developers have configured to match your backend solution. So as Kyle mentioned, we leverage machine learning and historical imports to kind of smart match these field names, and it looks like everything is matched up the way I want it to. There is an extra notes column here, but I don't need to import that into my app, so I'm just gonna leave that unmapped. If we click continue, we'll see the enum mapping screen. Here we can map the values that come in that are going to be mapped to an enum field. You'll see that these options for the enum field coming in on the incoming value side, and they're being mapped to the destination values. So it looks like status has these options, and my incoming values are mapping up pretty well. But it looks like priority, looks like I have low, medium, high options, but I also have a value coming in as none. If it's none, I'm going to assume it's low, so I want to set everything that comes in as none to low. And so everything looks good here. I'm going to continue again. So that completed the mapping step. And once that mapping step is completed, it will take us straight into the sheet that we just imported to, the work order sheet. Here we'll see all the data that we just imported mapped exactly the way we just told it to. We also see there are some errors that have already popped up. This is because we have written custom validations that run in the background. These validations can transform, normalize, clean the data any way you need it to. And it could also simply just flag when things are not the way it should be. Since the platform is code-driven, the world is really your oyster, and you can configure the Flatfile platform to run these custom validations automatically. So once these automatic validations are run, you can also go in and make edits manually. And as you do that, it will show you in real-time feedback the status of your data. Let's go ahead and make a couple of these changes. You'll see here that we have a character limit on service location. So this is flagged with Chicago being repeated here. So I want to go ahead and change that to not be repeated. To do this, I'm going to use my filter by error feature and look at the service location errors all at once. And I see that I have 3 errors of these repeated Chicago values. And I'm going to go ahead and manually change that to just be Chicago. And I'm able to do that here. And once I have fixed this, it disappeared because there are no issues on the service location field anymore. So let's click out of this and go back to our data set. We can see that there are a couple of priority levels that aren't filled in, and it's erroring because it's required. So I want to fill these all in, and since there is no priority set, I'm going to assume that they're low priority. So what I can do is replace empty values here and set this to low, replace all, and it'll automatically set all those to low. So the other thing that Kyle mentioned is our ability to transform data with AI. So let's say I want to make a bulk change in my data that requires some extra logic, and I don't want to go through each line one by one, as that would be super time consuming. For example, let's say that I want to set this priority level to high if the schedule start date is within the next month. So I can go ahead and do that in one fell swoop by leveraging the AI transform. Here I can write in natural language if the, and then let's click on the start date field. If the schedule start date is within the next 1 month, let's say, I want to set the priority field to high. So I'm going to click enter. And once we do that, I can see a preview of how the data will be transformed just to make sure that we're making the changes we mean to make. And we can see that the scheduled start date in the next month or so have been changed to high for the priority. So once I've confirmed this is what I actually want to do, I'm going to click on transform data. And then we'll see that the transform data job is completed and those changes have been made. Great. So taking a look at the data here, I want to point out a couple things. So we have two reference fields. We have the assigned technicians field and also the customers field. If we take a look at the customers field first, you'll see that it is a dropdown of the customer IDs. Because this is a reference field, it is actually referencing the customer sheet and taking the customer IDs from this column and listing them out here in this dropdown list. So this makes sure that I'm referencing a customer that actually exists. If I were to reference a customer ID that doesn't exist in the customer sheet, it would flag it as an error and say that this value doesn't exist in the reference table. And the same thing goes for the assigned technicians. It references the technician ID here, and we can see that reflected in this dropdown here. Alrighty, so now that my data doesn't have any errors and it looks exactly the way I want it to, I'm ready to get this data outside of Flatfile. And in this case, I would be submitting the data and it would go straight into my field service.show app. But this transform data can really be sent wherever you want it to go and in whatever format you need it to be in. So let's go ahead and click that submit data button. Great. It just takes a second to submit. I get a toast saying that it has been submitted successfully. So I'm going to quit this frame and we can take a look at the work orders. Takes a second to show up. There we go. So we can see that now I have all the data that I just pushed from Flatfile into my app all showed up here. Awesome. So what I showed you here today is just an example flow of how the embedded experience could look like in your application. However, there are endless possibilities as to how you could use the Flatfile platform, whether it be for project onboarding, file feeds that come in automatically, or dynamic portals, just to name a few. So if you'd like to learn more about how Flatfile could fit with your use case, please feel free to reach out to Kyle and I. We would love to have that discussion with you. All right, that is all I have. Kyle, I'll hand things back over to you.
Thank you so much. Hopefully that was helpful for everyone to be able to see Flatfile in action and how field services teams leverage us today. I'm going to give it another few seconds for the Q&A to come in. Thank you for everyone that submitted questions. We'll be tackling those in just a second. But while we're waiting, in the resources section, to kind of piggyback on what Sinyon said there, We do have some links there. So if you want to schedule time with us, feel free to go to the resources section and you can go ahead and click on a link to be able to book time with both of us. Okay, awesome. So the first question I see here is what file types does Flatfile support? Sinyan, I'm going to let you tackle that one.
Yeah, so like I said, by default, Flatfile accepts CSV files, but like you saw in my demo, I was able to submit an Excel file. That is because we have things called plugins that you can apply to your configuration. We have a variety of plugins, but specifically for importing different file types, we do have plugins for Excel, TXT, zip, things like that. So yeah.
Awesome. We got another question here around pricing. So how does pricing work with Flatfile? So I'll go ahead and take that. It's a great question. We offer 3 different plans. So we have a starter, professional, enterprise. And then the way the pricing works is each of those plans is going to have a subscription fee, or I should say at least the professional enterprise plans, a subscription fee, and then sort of some consumption based pricing. So the 2 things we look at for consumption are the number of files that you're importing into Flatfile, and then the size of those files. So really 3 components, a platform fee, the number of files, and then the size of those files. Great. It looks like we also have a question around egress, which I'm going to hand over to you, Sinyan. So how does egress work to our systems?
Right. So in the demo, I showed how exporting data outside of Flatfile, you can send it straight to your backend system. And like I said, you can move data outside of Flatfile in any format you need it to be in, whether it be in CSV format or in JSON format. It can also go into whatever destination you want it to be in. So it can really be configured in any way.
Great. Another question here around data storage. So does Flatfile store our customers' data? So I can go ahead and tackle that. We do have different deployment options, but our standard deployment, our cloud-based deployment, we do store our infrastructure is on Amazon here in the US. We can also support sort of regional servers as well with Amazon. So if you have a need to keep it in a certain region like Canada or the EU, we can support those as well. And I will say we do have some on-prem options as well if you need that. But by default, we are SOC 2, Type 2 compliant, HIPAA, GDPR, and we do store those files on Amazon. Cool. Another question here, does Flatfile support multiple languages? I can tackle that one as well. We do today support, I think, 13 or 14 languages. Some of the more common ones like English, French, German, Chinese, Japanese, Spanish. We have a full list of it within our documentation. But what I would say is if you have a certain language that maybe we don't support today, that is a requirement, reach out to us and we could probably get that built out for you. Great. Let me see if there's any more here. There's a question that came in, thank you, from George. Is there a maximum number of lines that you can import at any one time? Sina, do you want to tackle that? I'm happy to, if not.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say we have necessarily a maximum number of lines you can import, but maybe the file size, because it depends on how wide your table is, right? Not necessarily how long it is, but I would say right now, maybe the upper limit would be about 1 GB of data, which I know is a ton of data. So if you happen to have any data sets that go above that, we're happy to have that conversation, see what we can do about it. But hopefully 1 GB would be enough.
Great, thank you. One more is, what if we don't have developers? So I'm happy to tackle that. I would say that while Flatfile is a developer-focused configuration, what we showed today obviously is, what has been configured and is going to make it easy for a non-technical user. Having a developer can be certainly extremely helpful, but we also work with organizations that don't have developers to get this configured. We offer things like managed services within Flatfile, and we also have implementation partners that we could put you in touch with as well. So even if you don't have a developer, we'd still love to talk to you. Feel free to book some time with us.